There are more than 400,000 Amish people living in America right now, and like any group of 400,000 people, they have their share of problems, everything from theft and fraud to fights, and on rare occasions, real violence. But here is the strange part. If you walked into almost any prison in the country and went looking for an Amish inmate, you would have a genuinely hard time finding one. So how does an entire community of that size barely register in the prison system at all? I went down this rabbit hole expecting a warm, feel-good answer. What I actually found was a lot more complicated than that. Part of it is beautiful, and part of it is honestly disturbing. So let's start with the puzzle itself, because it is stranger than it sounds. There is no official statistic on how many Amish are incarcerated. The Federal Bureau of Prisons does not track religion that specifically, so nobody can hand you a clean number. But the scholars who have spent their careers studying these communities, the people at the Young Center for Anabaptist and Pietist Studies in Pennsylvania, put it about as bluntly as an academic ever will. Virtually no Amish people are in prison. The sheriff of Trumbull County, Ohio, told the Associated Press that in 2 decades on the job, he could remember exactly one Amish inmate. One. In 20 years. Now, the Amish are not some tiny, shrinking group either. According to that same research center, there were more than 410,000 of them across North America as of 2025, spread over 32 states and 3 Canadian provinces. And the population has roughly doubled every 20 years, driven by big families and the fact that most people who grow up Amish actually choose to stay. So this is not a handful of people in one valley. This is a fast-growing population the size of a major city, and they have somehow built a world where prison is almost beside the point. How do you even do that? To understand it, I had to start with the rule book that controls every single part of an Amish person's day. And the first surprising thing is that the rule book isn't really a book at all. It is called the Ordnung, which is just the German word for order. And the Ordnung is the complete set of rules that defines what it means to live as an Amish person, what you can wear, what color your buggy can be, whether you can have a phone, and if so, where you are allowed to keep it, whether your tractor can have rubber tires. The thing is, most of it is never written down. It lives in the community's memory. It gets passed along by word of mouth, and the members review it together twice a year before they take communion. And because every church district runs itself, with no headquarters and no central boss, the rules can change the moment you cross from one community to the next. In one district, a gas-powered washing machine might be perfectly fine. Drive 20 minutes down the road, and that same machine could get you in serious trouble. Same religion, completely different rule book. It is less like one big organization and more like hundreds of tiny, fiercely independent villages that happen to share a faith. And here is the piece that makes the whole system click into place. The Amish do not baptize babies. They wait until you are an adult, usually somewhere between 18 and 22, old enough to actually understand what you are signing up for. And when you choose to get baptized, you are not just joining a church. You are making a lifelong vow in front of the entire community to obey God and to obey the Ordnung for the rest of your life. Think about what that does. It means that later on, when someone breaks a rule, they have not just messed up. They have broken a sacred promise that they made as an adult, completely of their own free will. That is why discipline carries so much weight here. And it is also why roughly 85% of Amish young adults, after getting a real taste of the outside world, still choose to come back and take that vow anyway. So what actually happens when somebody breaks it? This is where I expected harsh punishment, And instead, I found something that looks a lot more like a ladder, with every rung designed to give you a way back. The first rung is quiet. If a member is caught doing something wrong, the ministers or the deacons simply come to visit them, privately. No public shame, no announcement. They sit down, they talk it through, and they urge the person to stop and to repent. And according to the scholars who study this, an enormous number of cases just end right there. Somebody slips up, gets a private word, course corrects, and life goes on. No drama. But if that does not work, things move into the open. The matter gets brought before the whole congregation, and the member is given the chance to confess. And we are not talking about a quiet word with a priest in a booth. In the most serious cases, a member literally kneels in front of the entire church and admits what they did out loud in front of everyone they know. Now imagine doing that in a community where everyone is your neighbor, your cousin, your business contact, and your friend all at once. That public confession is the punishment. The shame is the deterrent. And for most people, the thought of kneeling in front of everyone is more than enough to keep them in line. If someone still refuses to repent, the church can place them on probation, often for around 6 weeks, where the community starts pulling back from them socially. And this is the warning shot, the clear signal that says, this is your chance, come back now. But if a person digs in, refuses to confess, and rejects the church entirely, then the Amish reach for the most serious tool they have. And to understand why it is so powerful, you have to understand where it came from, because this one tool is literally the reason the Amish exist as a separate people at all. Rewind to 1693, to a region along the border of Switzerland and France. The Anabaptist movement had already been around for a while, a group of Christians who believed in adult baptism and refused to fight in wars. But within that movement, a tailor and elder named Jacob Ammon decided that the others had gone soft. He believed that when someone was excommunicated from the church, the punishment could not just be religious. It had to be total. Members in good standing should avoid that person completely. No eating at the same table, no doing business with them, full social separation. When other leaders pushed back and refused to go that far, Ammon excommunicated them right back. The movement split in two. The ones who followed the gentler path kept a name you still know today, the Mennonites. And the ones who followed Jacob Ammon took his name and became the Amish. So this practice, the thing at the very bottom of the discipline ladder, has two German names. The ban, which is excommunication, and the Meidung, which is the shunning that comes with it. And in its strictest form, it is intense. Members are not supposed to eat at the same table as a shunned person. They cannot accept money, gifts, or a ride from them. They cannot do business with them. In some communities, if it is your husband or your wife who has been shunned, you cannot even share a bed with them. You read that right. The entire community, including your own family, deliberately steps back from you, all at once. But here is the detail that everyone misses about shunning, and it completely changes how you should picture it. It is not designed to be a permanent exile. It is designed to bring you home. The whole point is to make life so lonely, so disconnected from everyone you love, that you feel pulled back toward confession and repentance. The scholars describe the Amish faith as having an open back door. The moment a shunned person is willing to kneel, confess, and promise to work with the church again, the shunning ends. They are welcomed back, usually after about 6 weeks, and the community is expected to treat them as if it never happened. The door is always left open. The shunning is the pressure. Forgiveness is the goal, and that flips the entire thing on its head. Because once I understood that, I stopped seeing this as a punishment system at all. I started seeing it as something else entirely. Something our modern world has been desperately trying to reinvent for decades. To really get it, you have to understand what the Amish actually believe, because their whole approach to wrongdoing flows from a handful of ideas that sit at the absolute center of their faith. The first is a word that is almost impossible to translate cleanly into English: Gelassenheit. It means something like yielding, or submission, or a calm letting go of your own will. The idea that you do not fight to control your own outcomes. You surrender your ego to God and to the community. And right next to it sits Demut, which means humility. In Amish life, pride is the great enemy. Standing out, asserting yourself, putting your own wants first, all of that is exactly what they are trying to train out of a person. Now layer on top of that their belief about forgiveness, which they take from the Lord's Prayer. Forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. The scholars who wrote the definitive book on this put it in 5 simple words. To be forgiven, we must forgive. For the Amish, that is not a nice sentiment on a coffee mug. It is a hard rule. If you want God to forgive you, you have no choice but to forgive the people who wrong you. And they reinforce this constantly through their sermons, through their hymns, and through old stories of their ancestors who were persecuted and killed for their faith. There is one story they hold on to above all the others, and it tells you everything. Back in 1569, an Anabaptist man named Dirk Willems was being chased across a frozen pond by a guard who wanted to arrest him, which back then meant execution. Willems made it across the thin ice safely, but the guard chasing him fell through and started to drown, and Dirk Willems turned around. He went back and he pulled the very man who was hunting him out of the freezing water and saved his life. The guard then promptly arrested him, and Willems was burned at the stake. For the Amish, that is not a tragedy. That is the model. That is what it looks. They try not to rely on the government's courts at all, because to them, dragging a fellow believer in front of a worldly judge or using the force of the state to get what you want is the opposite of turning the other cheek. They would rather absorb the loss and handle it among themselves. And suddenly, the whole prison thing makes sense. When your entire culture is built to handle conflict internally, through confession and forgiveness and reconciliation, you simply do not feed people into the outside justice system the way the rest of us do. A dispute that would land 2 of us in small claims court gets settled quietly between 2 Amish families. A young person who messes up gets a private visit instead of a police report. The community absorbs its own problems. In a strange way, they built the thing that criminal justice reformers have been chasing for years. A system focused on repairing harm and bringing the wrongdoer back into the fold, instead of just locking them away. And when you see it working at its best, it is genuinely moving. There is honestly no better example of that than what happened on a quiet October morning in 2006. In a small Amish community called Nickel Mines in rural Pennsylvania, a man who was not Amish carried out a horrific act of violence against the community before taking his own life. Several innocent people lost their lives that day. It was one of the most devastating things you can imagine, the kind of tragedy that breaks a community forever. And here is what the Amish did. That same day, while their community was still reeling, members of that community went to visit the family of the man who did it, not to scream at them, but to comfort them. They told his widow that they did not hold this against her. When he was buried, about half of the people who showed up at his funeral were Amish. They hugged his parents. and when donations poured in for the grieving families, the Amish insisted that some of that money go to the family of the man responsible, because his loved ones had lost a husband and a father too. The whole world watched this and could barely process it, because it is almost superhuman. It is forgiveness on a level most of us cannot even fully understand. Now, the scholars are careful to point out that forgiveness for the Amish does not mean the pain disappears, or that what he did was okay. They grieved for years. Forgiving the man did not excuse the crime. But it was real, and it was immediate, and it came straight out of everything we just talked about. The humility, the duty to forgive, the refusal to seek revenge. At its absolute best, this is what the Amish system produces. Grace, that the rest of the world finds almost impossible. If you are finding this as fascinating as I did, take a second to subscribe, because I dig into closed-off communities and the hidden systems that run them all the time, and you are going to want the next one. So at this point in my research, I will be honest, I was kind of in AWE. I thought I had the whole story. A peaceful people who forgive instead of punish, who repair instead of imprison. A model the rest of us could learn from. But the deeper I dug, the more I started to realize that the exact same machinery that produced that breathtaking forgiveness at nickel mines had also been used to do something much, much darker. And this is the part where it stopped being beautiful. Because think back to how the system actually works. Someone does something wrong, they confess, they are shunned for a few weeks, and then they are forgiven, and the community is expected to act like it never happened. That works wonderfully when the sin is owning a forbidden tractor. But what happens when the sin is not a tractor? What happens when the crime is something that should never, ever be handled with a 6-week timeout and a clean slate? In 2020, a journalist named Sarah McClure published the results of a year-long investigation in Cosmopolitan, working with the nonprofit Type Investigations. And what she documented was genuinely disturbing. She identified 52 official, documented cases of serious crimes against vulnerable members of Amish and related communities spread across 7 states over roughly 2 decades. And she was very clear that those 52 cases were not the whole story. They were only the ones that somehow made it into official records. She described them as barely scratching the surface of a problem that mostly stays hidden, because the structure of these communities is built in a way that keeps it hidden. Here is how that happens. When a serious crime comes to light inside a community like this, it often does not go to the police. It goes to the church leaders. And the church has one main tool for dealing with sin, the same tool we have been talking about this whole time: confession and forgiveness. So in case after case that McClure and other reporters uncovered, the person responsible would be made to confess, would be shunned for a few weeks, and would then be welcomed back, forgiven. And the person who had been harmed would be strongly pressured to forgive and to never speak of it again. The Pittsburgh Post-Gazette documented this same pattern in a major investigative series they called Coverings: Forgive and Forget. Except this time, the thing being forgotten was a serious crime, and the person being forced to move on was the one who had been hurt. And it gets worse because of how the law itself is written. In most states, certain professionals like teachers and doctors are legally required to report a suspected serious crime when they learn about one. But an Associated Press investigation found that 33 states carve out an exception for clergy, especially when the information comes through something like a religious confession. So when someone confesses to a bishop, in many places, that bishop is under no legal obligation to pick up the phone and call the authorities. The confession that is supposed to bring justice can instead become the thing that buries it. In one case in Pennsylvania, a bishop was actually charged for this. A member of his community had confessed to him about a serious crime, and instead of going to the police, the bishop reportedly handled it inside the church and told concerned members to let it go. He was eventually charged with failing to report, but even then, the felony charge got knocked down to a misdemeanor, and he ended up with probation and some community service. The man who committed the crime and the leader who covered for him both moved through a system that was designed from the ground up to forgive rather than to hold anyone accountable. You would think that somewhere along the way, someone with authority would have stepped in and said, "No, not this. This goes to the police." For a long time, in a lot of these communities, nobody did. But it is not true that the Amish never end up in the outside justice system. They do. It just usually takes something extreme to get them there, and the cases that break through tell you a lot. Take the case of a young woman named Mary Byler in Wisconsin. After years of being harmed by members of her own family, she did something almost unheard of. She went outside the community and reported it to the actual police. All three of the men responsible pleaded guilty. Two of them were sent to prison, one for 4 years and another for 8 years. But the one she said had hurt her the most got the lightest punishment of all, a single year, and he served it at night in the county jail, with work release during the day so he could keep his job. And here's the part that stays with you. When the case went to court, around 150 members of the Amish community reportedly showed up, not to support her, to support the men who had harmed her. That is how strong the pressure to forgive and to protect the community can be. Then there is the strangest case of all, out of Ohio in 2011. A breakaway Amish leader named Sam Mullet led a group that launched a series of attacks on other Amish people they had feuded with. And the weapon they chose was deeply symbolic. They forcibly cut off the men's beards and the women's hair, which in Amish culture is a profound humiliation. 16 members of the group were convicted of federal hate crimes, and Mullet was sentenced to 15 years, though the hate crime convictions were later overturned on a technicality, and he was resentenced to a shorter term. But the important thing to understand is that mainstream Amish communities saw Mullet's group as a dangerous, breakaway SECT. This was not normal Amish behavior. It was a cult-like offshoot that the wider Amish world wanted nothing to do with. And occasionally, the clash between the two worlds is just surreal. Back in the late 1990s, two Amish men in Pennsylvania, both named Abner Stoltzfus, got caught up in a federal case for buying cocaine from a motorcycle gang and selling it within their own community at weekend gatherings. Both pleaded guilty, and when they were sentenced, nearly 200 Amish reportedly packed the courtroom. The image of plain-dressed Amish farmers in a federal drug case is the kind of thing that sounds made up, and it is completely real. So where does that leave us? After going through all of it, I landed in a place that is genuinely uncomfortable, because both things are true at the exact same time. On one side, the Amish really have built something remarkable. They have very low crime, almost no one in prison, no homeless people sleeping on the streets of their communities, and a model of repairing harm and welcoming people back that, honestly, the rest of us could learn a lot from. The forgiveness is real. The community care is real. But on the other side, that very same system, the confess, shun, forgive, and forget machine, can fail the most vulnerable people imaginable. When the wrongdoing is a forbidden phone, forgiveness is a beautiful thing. When the wrongdoing is a crime that shatters a life, that same instinct toward quiet internal forgiveness can leave the people who were hurt with no justice, no protection, and no one to turn to. I should be fair here, because the Amish are not one single monolith. There are dozens of different affiliations, ranging from the ultra-strict groups who shun for life to more lenient communities that are far more flexible. Practices vary enormously from one settlement to the next, and things are slowly starting to change. Some Amish communities are beginning to cooperate with law enforcement. Some states have tightened their reporting laws, and a growing number of survivors who have left these communities are speaking out, loudly, and forcing a conversation that simply was not allowed to happen before. So I started this whole thing asking a simple question. Why don't the Amish go to prison? And I found a real answer. They have built an entire world designed to handle its own problems through forgiveness instead of force. But the real question, the one I cannot stop thinking about, is not whether their system works. It is who it works for. Because a system built entirely on forgiveness is a gift to the person who did wrong. The harder question is what it leaves for the person who was wronged. If you want to go deeper on the closed worlds most people never get to see inside, the video on screen right now is the perfect place to go next. I will see you there.